Welcome to Colliers Talks, a podcast series featuring the latest trends, insights, research, and developments in commercial real estate in Canada and beyond.
Hi, I'm Jamieson Jackson, Managing Director of the Office Practice Group here at Colliers. Today, as part of our Tech to Watch series, part of the Colliers Talks program, we speak to up-and-coming tech leaders about how they started their businesses and what makes them succeed. Stay tuned for what's next.
Okay, and good afternoon, and welcome back to the Colliers Tech to Watch program. I'm joined today by Brian Sutherland at Yardi Systems, and I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about Yardi and not only sort of your past, but the future as well, and where that goes next. I think a good place to start then, why don't we start with this? Tell me about the origin story of Yardi. How did it get going, and what do you do now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for your partnership as well with Yardi. You guys have been a longtime client, and we certainly appreciate that. So in terms of Yardi's background, we were founded here in Santa Barbara, California. That remains our head office. There's about 800 employees here of our 8,000 employees now. But Anant Yardi is our founder and president. He founded the company initially as a programmer to manage his own properties. And so he invested in multifamily assets here in Santa Barbara and needed an operating platform to collect rent and to manage the accounting for those assets that he had purchased, and developed a software package to do that. And so that was 40 years ago this year that he built that business, and we've grown to become the largest software provider globally in the space. And so Anant still remains very active with the business, as do his sons. So Anant's two sons are Kevin and Jason. But it's a family-run business now, and I think that's something that we really hang our hats on in terms of being a family business. I think, when you look at a lot of our competitors out in the space, they're either VC funded or have gone public. But I think having that private ownership, I think, makes us unique in the marketplace.
Tell me how.
Well, I think as privately owned business, we don't answer shareholders. We have no outside investments or investors, and with that, we can really take the business where we'd like it to go. I think many times, if you have outside investors, you're beholden to where they want to go, and they might have different objectives for their business and where they want to bring it. And I think it complicates things at times. Certainly has some advantages as well, but being an entrepreneur myself, I was entrepreneur for 17 years prior to joining Yardi, and it was a good spot to land. It felt like home, and I think coming in here and feeling like it's a family business, even though we're 8,000 strong, it still has that culture, and that's something that I really enjoy about it.
Also can allow a much longer time investment and investment horizon. So in a publicly traded company, you're often looking at quarterly reports.
That's right.
Business, you can say, we know that this is going to cost us for 2 years, but it's worth it long term.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we certainly acknowledge. We do a lot of development, 1,500 developers here, and put out a lot of product. We don't always get it right the first time, and sometimes we bring things to market, and we have a long runway to make sure it's successful, and really work with our clients to ensure that the product's right before we bring it to market. And to your point, we don't have to hit a quarterly number, and we don't have that type of pressure on us. And so I think that's given us an advantage, I think, in the marketplace.
Makes sense. So maybe let's talk about where you are now. So who is Yardi's ideal client, and how are you uniquely positioned to serve them?
Yeah, so I think maybe I'll just start by saying Yardi's 100% real estate focused from a platform perspective. We serve all asset classes. So multifamily would be our largest group, followed by commercial. Commercial is the group that I oversee from a sales and marketing perspective. And as we define that, office, industrial, retail, emerging markets like co-working. We also have corporate occupancy. In terms of our ideal client, I mean, we have so many great clients here. It's tough to say who our ideal client is.
Sure.
But I think, I would look at our values as an organization. As an organization, we're really focused on our clients. We're really focused on innovation. We're really focused on our employees. And we're really focused on philanthropic efforts as well. And so I think when we find companies that have the same sort of values, we typically have very long-term partnerships. In fact, just a number to share, our average customer has been with us for 17 years. And so when we enter these relationships, we like to align with them, we like to partner with them, we like to grow with them. And I think more so, more than what we're looking for out of them, I think I would like to flip it and say we like to understand what they are looking for and how we can grow with them. And we love having that. We love when a customer has a challenge. I think we can look at COVID, for example. And for us, the first thing we thought about was what impact is this going to have on real estate? And so we underwrote a couple projects, one with Realcomm, where we try to bring in industry experts in terms of what's going on in the market. We underwrote a tenant impact survey with BOMA International, and in that survey, it was 3,000 tenant decision makers that we did a survey with in terms of what their needs were post-pandemic, and really what was gonna take to get their employees back into the office, for example, or when they're assessing space needs, what were they really thinking about? Were they going to downsize? Were they going to expand their space because of space density and those sorts of things? And so those are just a couple, kind of unique projects that we did in response to the pandemic. And then from a platform perspective, I could say, we directly changed our platform based upon what was going on. What we saw was investors were asking more questions in terms of who's our tenant base, right? And you can maybe take industrial, for example, and by classification or maybe SIC code, you can really qualify your tenants with risk. And so if, a tenant that was maybe in cold beverage storage was doing quite well during the pandemic, there was more need for that. Another tenant that might have been in storage for party rentals and events, they would have been maybe put at more risk. And so we kind of changed our platform to really track more at the tenant level and give more visibility into tenant risk, because that's what I think landlords were looking for. That's what investors were looking for.
Interesting. It's an interesting pivot, because if you can drill down into NAIC codes, what they're really looking about is how do they manage their risk and how do they maximize that asset. And then in a COVID situation is how do you play defense more effectively?
Yeah. Or looking at, even, looking at different cities and looking at things like weighted average lease expiration, right? And what's our overall exposure in a given market? And so, we were starting to look at items like that. And, New York City, for example, their average weighted lease expiration was 7.5 years, where other markets, say like a Miami, shorter term leases, it was about 4.5 years. And so you can take that and say there's some risk with that, right? And maybe Miami might be at more risk than New York City because the lease expirations are going to come up quicker. And so when those decisions are being made in terms of,
yes.
What's that?
As long as everyone's paying, yes.
Yeah, exactly. But then there's other factors, right? And there's migration going on. And so in the States, what we've seen is a migration to the South. A lot more folks are moving, say, out of California, and they're going to Texas, they're going to Florida. And so with that, is Miami at more risk than New York City? I don't know. I mean, it's something that I think you have to kind of evaluate, but there's a lot of different ways and lenses to look at items like that. And, we're always trying to help out our customers and evaluate overall risk for them and the business as a whole.
Okay, makes sense. I thought that was an interesting approach where you're saying your ideal customer is actually a company that aligns with similar values, which I think is interesting because that'll allow you to iterate faster and go faster together. Yeah.
And it seems like the productive meetings are the collaborative meetings we have with our clients. And when I say that, really understanding where they're going strategically. And I think, you look at REITs, for example, and by and large, REITs were single asset class REITs. There would be, REITs that would specialize in industrial, or REITs that would specialize in office. And now we're seeing more of a convergence of asset classes. And we're seeing multifamily clients moving into industrial. We see folks that might have been in office, maybe thinking about going into multifamily, maybe thinking about going into more mixed use projects. But that's the type of thing, those major shifts is what drives our platform forward, and really understanding where they're going, where the market's going, and then how can we evolve. The last thing we want to do is sit there and not ever change and say we have a great platform, we have 50% of the market share on the commercial and multifamily side, and tailwinds are with us. But I think if you stop innovating, stop growing, that's where your risk really is. And I think that's from a software provider, as well as a service provider, as well as a commercial landlord.
Makes sense. And I suppose being a family-run business, that also gives you the edge to be a lot more nimble. So when the market does shift, as we've seen over the last 2 years, you can add more products, features, shift the focus of what you're doing much more easily. Yeah,
100%. And I'm always surprised at how quickly things can move here. We've made acquisitions in certain spaces that have been unknowns, right? And an example would be maybe co-working. So we acquired a co-working company roughly about 5 years ago that had an operating platform to really manage those short-term leases, manage the members, try to get a better experience, manage Wi-Fi, partitioning of that, private office rentals, that type of thing. I would say we had a huge downturn come March 2020. And I think there was a lot of uncertainty. And I would say most would think that co-working would be at risk and be at risk long term. And I think what we have seen is the need for more flexibility. So employees want that. They want flexible schedules. I think for them to return to the office, they want more collaboration space for coaching, and really a better built environment. And so we've seen, I think, an uptick in co-working. And I would say this year is very positive. Our numbers showed about 1,000 new operators in the last couple of years have actually popped up. Many have gone out of business at the beginning stages of the pandemic, but many are emerging. And as corporate occupiers as well are thinking about their space needs and what's important to them, I think it's a viable line of business, and I think it's something that we probably wouldn't have predicted March 2020.
I can agree with that, and that also matches with our data. I mean, our own internal data is showing that up to a 500% increase in demand for co-working space because there's a desire for flexibility, and people are willing to purchase that flexibility.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it. And I joke, I was in New York a few weeks ago and meeting with some clients there, and talking to them in terms of return to office and what they're seeing. The numbers that they were talking about roughly in the range of 25 to 35% of employees were coming back at least a couple, 2-3 days a week. I would say New York felt good though, and but that number felt accurate as well. But while I was there, I was joking with them and said, I come back into the office, I'm here today, and typically speaking, I got about 9,000 square feet to myself. And so there's a lot of space, there's a lot of cubes, there's a lot of empty offices, and it's this interesting time right now because I come in, and unless my team's here, outside of getting away from maybe the distractions at home and changing up my work environment, it's interesting to see what's going to get me back. And I think what we're going to see is the class A plus offices that have the amenities, that have a really nice built environment. That's where I think we're going to see office thrive, and I think that's where we're going to see a reduction of risk. If you look at the lower class of office buildings, what's the difference of working in your room than going to an office? And if the experience isn't any different, and the employees, because the job market maybe can't request their employees to come back in right now, what's really going to be that driver. And so it'll be interesting to see how things pan out in the future, and see how things evolve.
Let's talk about that actually. So how is Yardi using their real estate to grow their business? Because I'm sure it's, as you mentioned, it's changed a lot. How are you using your own real estate to grow the business now?
Yeah, so interesting. When the pandemic happened, we went from virtually 100% work from office to virtually 100% work from home. And if it was 95.5%, it became 5%, 95%. And that ended up being the easiest part of the equation, getting employees out of the office. We had technology to support it. Microsoft Teams was just coming in. Webcams were just starting to be used. And of course, all that was accelerated due to the pandemic. The challenge, though, that we found as an organization in terms of our own real estate is how do we get people back in? And so we actually developed an occupancy management application that allowed employees of Yardi to see who was working that day from a mobile device, to see what space was available for them to use, to reserve a space, to reserve a conference room. And that's something that we have since packaged and kind of put out in the market. But it was a tool that we initially used for our employees because it's a real problem. How is space going to be used? How do you get visibility? How do you collaborate with your team and understand what days you should come in? And how do you facilitate, office reentry in this flexible hybrid manner? So I would say that's one example. We've had other examples though too, where in Miami, we made a commitment to a co-working location because that seemed to be most of our co-working team happened to be out of that Miami area as well. Right. But we had folks that wanted to come in, still see each other, but we may not have needed a big office. And so that was another example of how we kind of occupied the space. And I would say it's still early stages though, more broadly. I think if you would have asked me a year ago, I would have said, yeah, after Labor Day 2021, we'll all be back in the office. And then that obviously changed. And then I would have said it would have been January 2022. I think, right after the holiday season, we'll get back in. That's changed. Now, April 1st is when I would say things will start to go back to normal, and we'll see, we'll see how this all pans out. It's hard to predict exactly what it will look like, but it's going to be different. I think we all need to learn, whether, we're in the real estate business or not, but, it's and there's so many driving factors from gas prices right now, right, to the way the job market is. And in many respects, I say the tail's wagging the dog. And you have major companies like, Jamie Dimon at, JP Morgan isn't requiring folks in finance to come back into the office. And you would say, that's kind of a major area where you think that demand would be there. Will that change? Maybe if gas prices do, maybe if the job market changes, we'll see a bigger shift and more demand for that. But I think everyone's being very careful and trying to be calculated with these decisions and not move too quickly.
Yep. Yeah, I think a lot of companies are just starting to bring their teams back in a hybrid workplace right now. And the question is, how do those teams work together? That until individual companies have a handle on that, it's going to be hard to make planning decisions.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would say, interestingly enough, I think commercial office landlords probably are the closest folks that have the answer. And the reason I say that is they were the ones requiring their employees to come back in right after the kind of first wave and the lockdown and us flattening the curve, and then they had their employees come back. And so they were, in many respects, kind of the guinea pigs in terms of getting employees back. What sort of health and safety measures needed to be there? How did they kind of communicate this? Did they go hybrid? Did they go full 100% back into the office? And so, they needed to encourage their employees to come back. They wanted business as usual, and that makes sense that they would have that demand.
See that. You talked a little bit about, the labor market shifts and the tail wagging the dog. Tell me about that. How does that affected Yardi and, this challenges around the labor market? I mean, have you experienced that? How are you? We have, for sure. We've got hundreds of job openings right now, and it's very
Yeah.
challenging to hire people.
Yeah, we have hundreds as well. And I would say it's been very tough. And I would say from a salary requirement standpoint, we felt the pressure there, meaning employees are coming back in and they're getting multiple offers, or it's tougher for them to leave, their current position. So that's been challenging. And I think that's maybe one aspect of it. But because of the labor shortage, because I think everyone's busy and they might be wearing more than one hat now, right? And have demand on their team in terms of headcount and taking on more responsibility than they maybe previously had. At least with our customers, I think it's a challenge, because how do they take on projects, right? They might have an initiative to bring on a construction and development solution, that we really need this solution in place. It's going to save us X, Y, and Z. But yikes, we don't have anyone to implement this product. And how do we change course when we're understaffed, we're all overburdened, and how do you effectively kind of carve out that time? And so I think that's always been a challenge with our customers. Real estate is a good business to be in. I think it's growing, and everyone's busy, but then you take the labor shortages on top of it, and certainly kind of makes it a bigger challenge.
Of course. Tell me this then. So what's next for Yardi? Like, what does the future look like? How is Yardi going to change over the next few years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say we're constantly evolving. With that, I think the acceptance of change, the acceptance of taking on risk, being willing to fail, I think is also very key. But I think not having the blinders on, I think would be a huge statement, and just really understanding what's going on in the market. And our company is driven by market. It's driven by customers, and it's going to be interesting. Anytime there is disruption in the market, like we've seen, there's a need to be resilient and evolve. And there's always a resurgence as well. And what that resurgence is going to be, I think is what's most key. And we need to listen more carefully now than ever. And we need to continue to take risk as an organization. We need to continue to grow, and we need to continue to evolve. What that looks like exactly, certainly hard to say. But I will say that's what I love about working for this company is just the amount of innovation. Our product mix looked very different in 1982 than it did in 92, 2002, and 2012, right? And today. But that's what I love about it, and I love the fact that we're focused on product, we're focused on innovation, and things continue to evolve. And I think for us, changing maybe the perception of us being just a property management and accounting platform, and really having a solution to serve all aspects of real estate operations, I think has been what has been exciting over the last 5 years, especially for me on the commercial side.
Very good. Well, Brian, thank you very much for joining us on that Colliers Tech to Watch program. This has been an interesting conversation, and we really look forward to seeing where Yardi goes over those next few years and see where you innovate to next.
Yeah, we'll really appreciate the time and for having me join. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks for listening to Colliers Talks podcast. To learn more about Colliers Canada, our experts, and our solutions, visit collierscanada.com or find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook.